We live in the hope of things to come. This is from the Holy Apostle Paul. And in the Liturgy, there is a prayer in which we ask the Lord to deliver us from famine, pestilence, earthquake, civil war, etc. Many things. And today we have this pestilence, which is the coronavirus. And there is a fear because of the way it is so widespread globally. But this is not the only thing. We also have fear for earthquakes. The fear of earthquakes is very imminent here in the Pacific Northwest, as we know, and so people are waiting for the big one to come. So, you know, one day maybe Mount Rainier will explode. It's certainly not extinct, it's dormant. So we live in fear of the virus and other diseases. We live in fear of earthquakes, and we also fear climate change. This is a universal fear about the climate changing, and that we have to do something about the planet to save it. There's also a fear of financial recession. And many people now, because of the virus, have lost their jobs. If they get their jobs back, do they have money to spend? Are they going to be able to buy anything in order to get businesses running again? In other words, as customers. So these are the fears that we face today. And if we love the world, then these things, pestilence, earthquake, financial recession, are unbearable. If we love the world, these things are unbearable. St. Isaac of Nineveh, and I want to read a quote here. Temptation or trial is profitable for every man. Trial and temptation is profitable. So this virus, this situation at the moment, potential earthquake, a financial recession, is profitable for every man. And he goes on to say, for the ascetic, and I assume he's talking about monks in particular here, for the ascetics, temptation adds to their riches, to their spiritual powers, to the gifts that God's given. It adds to them. And for the slothful, it enables them to guard themselves from basically being lazy and waking up about being children. I'm talking about Christians, I'm not talking about the world this time. And he says here, for the sleepy, wakefulness. And those who are far from God, they grow closer because of the temptations, because of the tribulation. And God's own, they have boldness to enter the kingdom of heaven. This is St. Isaac of Nineveh. Another quote by St. Mark the Ascetic. When tested by some trial, you should try to find out not why or through whom it came, but only how to endure it gratefully, without distress and rancor. So how can we endure the temptations like this, the virus in particular, gratefully? Because we know that God allows it for our salvation. St. Isaac says, again, this quote from St. Isaac, if we have fear, we do not love God. If we love the world, we cannot love God. And the Holy Apostle says, perfect love casts out fear. So if we're fearful because of the temptations, the tribulations, the trials that we're going through at this moment in time, then we do not love God. We certainly do not love God. We do not trust God. But as you know, we all know, it's impossible to live without temptation. But we have to be careful, because we may be tempted to want these tribulations, because we believe that if we labour through it, we will get bodily benefits. I think this is on the level of superstition. if I go to church and if I say my prayers, then everything will be fine. I won't have any bodily affliction. I won't catch the virus. This is nonsense. It's very and St. Isaac says that this actually is a very dangerous attitude. So we are condemned if we wish to receive bodily benefits in return for labours, says St. Isaac. But we should turn all our labours towards the hope of things to come. The virus too is like, I think it's like Job in his affliction, bodily afflictions. You remember Job was covered with boils, apart from other misfortunes. And I think the virus is very similar. And also it's interesting that it's coming during the time of Great Lent, which is a time of extra prayers, time of fasting, time for repentance. This is promisal Borgia. This is God's providence, and this should happen at this time. So we are given the tools, the strength, because we are fasting, because we have church, because of the holiness of this period will help us to make sense of the tribulation. And don't say it will protect us. Not necessarily. And if we do get the virus, well, maybe we will die, because that's what we're meant to do. Because when we go, we go. There's no arguing about that. God has decided that. But on the other hand, it could be we get the virus and we get through it and we come out the other side. But the spiritual benefit, not the physical healing, is the most important thing. St. Isaac says that God's care is hidden and it is not absent from us even for a moment. So it's always there. And he says, the spirit of the devil dwells in those who pass their lives in ease. So Isaac very, very emphasizes a lot about ease and comfort, because this is what we seek. And he says the spirit of the devil dwells in those who pass their lives in ease. The Spirit of God does not dwell in a body that is relaxed by ease. What is ease? Wanting to live without stress, healthy. Not that this is wrong to be healthy, but we should not be desiring it. We should be grateful if we are healthy. Then we should give thanks to God. But I think he's talking about on a more level of under stress, we may be smoking. And people will smoke. But there are people that smoke. Drinking. This is a common habit. People come home from work or a stressful day, and the first thing they do is have a drink, a beer, a whiskey, whatever, as a form of ease, comfort. I'm trying to think of the word. A sort of solace, because of the difficulty of the day that we've been through. This is where the devil dwells, in these things, and they are wrong. And we should not be seeking relief. That's the word I want. We should not be seeking relief, but we should be seeking endurance. We should be seeking patience to be able to do these things. When you are unoppressed, without temptation, do not rejoice. And you remember the story, probably remember the story of St. Basil the Great with a widow. He was serving the liturgy and he looked into the church and there was this widow weeping, making prostrations, and he felt very sorry for her. So at the end of the liturgy, he sent his deacon to find out what was wrong. And the deacon came to her and she said, I am weeping because I've not been tempted for at least a month, and I feel that God has abandoned me. Unto you it is given from God, not only to believe on Christ, but also to suffer for his sake. This is the Saint Apostle Paul. Unto you it is given from God, not only to believe on Christ, but also to suffer for his sake. Another example is Abba Amun, who was clairvoyant and had lots of spiritual gifts, and he wanted to go and visit St. Anthony in the desert. And the desert around where St. Anthony lived was very dangerous. There was no water, I mean the heat probably of the sun, and Amun is walking, and eventually he's overcome by the heat, and he kneels down and he prays. And his prayer is, O Lord, let not thy creature perish. Let not thy creature perish. And he fell asleep. Then later he woke up, and when he woke up there was a hand in the sky pointing towards where St. Anthony lived in his mountain. And so he followed this hand and met St. Anthony. Likewise, St. Macarius of Egypt was carrying baskets that he was taking to the market to sell. And he was crossing the desert, and it was very hot. And he had to stop because he couldn't go any further. And he prayed, O God, thou knowest that I have no strength. Amun says, Lord, let not thy creature perish. St. Macarius says, O God, thou knowest that I have no strength. Neither of them did expect or demand to be rescued, to be relieved. They didn't. They asked for strength, and the other one asked, but I have no strength. And the other one said, let not thy creature perish. They did not demand or expect to be rescued. St. Isaac goes on to say, there is no man who will not feel oppressed at the time of training. Yes, of course we feel stressed by this virus and that we can't go to church and all this sort of pressure that's coming upon us. Yes, we do feel oppressed by it, but it is a part of our training or temptation. So yes, we who would not feel oppressed by it. But without temptation, man cannot acquire a strong constitution. And Saint Isaac refers to pottery, making pots, that you have to fire them and glaze them so that they can withstand water. Otherwise, they're no good. And so we need to be fired in the fire of temptation, the fire of tribulation, the furnace of tribulation. We need to go through that in order to have a strong spiritual constitution. And he says, which is quite alarming, I think, he says, and the closer you are to God, the more hardships. Oh, that's quite a bit scary thing, isn't it? I mean, we're working hard, we're praying, and yet it'll be even worse as we get closer to God. The closer to God, the more hardship. It's not God's pleasure that we should live in ease while we're in the flesh. And he also says that we need to experience temptation, evil, so that we have a taste for good, which is the next life, the hope of the things to come. This is what's important, not the situation we're in now. This is a part of training. Also, it's for our benefit, although we probably find it very difficult to believe that. Lord, make me worthy of temptation. So that should be our prayer. Make me worthy to be tempted. The soul that loves God finds rest only in God, says St. Isaac. And we're now going through a period of repentance, coming up to Pascha. And so this is the strength that we have. And then we realize through this tribulation that it is the next life that's important. That we need to endure, have patience, don't make demands on God, help me, rescue me, but admit our weakness and God will do the rest. The body that fears temptation becomes the friend of sin. Lord, grant us to be worthy of temptation.